Welcome to How Do They Afford That, the podcast that peeks into the financial lives of everyday Australians. I'm Michael Thompson. I'm a writer and the co-host of the Fear and Greed Business News podcast. As always, I'm with Canna Campbell, financial planner and founder of Sugar Mama TV, the financial literacy platform on YouTube and podcasts and books and Instagram and more. Good morning, Canna.
Good morning, Michael. I have two saving hacks for you.
Oh, double.
Well, for you and for everyone that's listening now.
They're just for me. Please, go on. Everyone else, block your ears. These are just for me. Go.
All right. Well, they are restaurant related.
Okay.
So Eat Club app and First Table.
What was the first one?
Eat Club
Eat Club.
and First Table.
Okay. And now are these two separate tips? Two separate hacks?
Well, they're kind of competitors. So I'm kind of rolling two hacks into the one.
Okay.
But they have a whole range of restaurants that they are associated with, and they open up their tables with discounts of up to 50% off your bill.
What?
Yeah. There's catches, though. You have to turn up between about sort of 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. So the whole principle is to get more customers into their restaurants at the early opening hours and get them out of the restaurant before it obviously hits peak time.
Well, I mean, we have young kids. I mean, 5 to 6 p.m. is like prime dinner time.
I was thinking the same thing. Tom and I were having a bit of a laugh because we're about to try this in a couple of weeks at a new restaurant that's opened up near our home. And they are on First Table where you can get up to 50%. And a friend was saying, yeah, but you've got to go so early. I'm like, that's a dream, because then also you go to bed early as well.
Oh, that is great. And isn't that sad that we are probably both excited about the idea of eating dinner early and going to bed early? It's just...
Talk about yourself. No, I'm proud of eating dinner early and going to bed early. I love it. I embrace it. I'm not ashamed.
I'm not ashamed, but I'm just like, it's probably not as exciting as I'd like to be. Though, to be fair, anyone who knows me knows that I've never been exciting. So
See, I spring out of bed at 5 a.m, so I love going to bed early.
Well, you know what? We might leave that alone because they're great tips though. That is a great idea. Eat Club and First Table.
Yes. So if you're doing a date night, this is a great way of potentially saving some money. And quite often, I mean, 50% is a good discount, and you have to redeem it. So you've got to book and you've got to turn up. And if you don't turn up, you don't get charged. But it's definitely worth knowing if you are going to dinner anyway and you're looking at what restaurant, if you see them listed on Eat Club or First Table, perhaps you can save some money there.
That is amazing. All right, great tip. Thank you for that. Today's episode is, it comes out of a conversation that I had recently with somebody who was saying quite simply that when their daughter was born, and she's about 5 years old now, when she was born, they wanted to start saving for her education. And they had a really simple goal, that money wouldn't place any limits on her education, which I actually thought was a really nice kind of goal to say that, you know what, whatever we need for your education as you grow older, that money will not be the thing that stops that. I thought, okay, that's nice.
It's admirable.
It is. I thought it was. The problem was, they said they just didn't know what to do, how to actually do that. What are the steps to do that? Is it kind of savings or a term deposit or investing in shares or property or even kind of starting one of those, the school savings plans through a bank? And so I thought, because I'm constantly kind of mining conversations that I have with other people for ideas for this podcast, I thought that sounds like a good episode. Obviously, before we kind of get into this, because we are talking about financial products and different kind of scenarios here, it is important to know that what we are talking about is general in nature. It is not personal or investment or strategic or product advice. It is purely for financial education purposes only.
That's right. Everyone is in a different situation with different goals, at different deadlines and different risk profiles. So you really need to go and see a financial planner and ask them for personal advice. Okay,
so I mentioned this person's goal was to ensure that money wouldn't put any limits on a child's education, which is a great goal. But do you need to be more specific? Should you start with a target figure in mind, or is it better to kind of keep it open-ended like that and just kind of keep trying to funnel money into this thing?
Well, look, you're never going to be able to hit a target that you can't see.
Oh, I like that.
I think Anthony Robbins, of course, should quote Anthony Robbins actually there and not claim it as mine. But, all right, yes, you do need to look into how much money you actually need. So that means looking at the different options and working out, okay, well, are we looking at, a private school? If it's a private school, is it a Catholic private school? Or at what age do we want our daughter to go to commence this school? Mm-hmm. And how much does that school cost per year? Because the older they get, typically the more expensive it becomes. What year will they start? Will they start at year 7, or will they start at year 5 or year 10, or, all these things. And of course, what are all the additional expenses on top of? Because there's excursions, there's uniforms, there's sporting equipment, there's tuition. Like there's a lot of extracurricular activities which are on top of.
So suddenly saying that you're saving for education is probably too broad a goal. And these are things that you can do rough estimates for. And it probably is helpful to look at a couple of stats here. Schooling is very, very expensive. Once you get into private schools, which is an option for a lot of people, it is not an option for plenty of others. And there are plenty of costs associated with public schools as well. Plenty of excursions and plenty of kind of other fees that you still need to be paying to public schools every year, voluntary contributions, that kind of thing. But how much does it actually cost? How much are we talking when we are looking at private schools in Australia?
Well, Australia is one of the most expensive countries in the world for education. I believe we are just behind maybe the Middle East. And this is coming from the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization.
UNESCO.
Yes, UNESCO. And the Financial Review published a story back in January, and they stated that Sydney average school fee per year, $35,000 a year.
That is extraordinary.
And that's money you've got to pay tax, and then you've got to pay that.
That's more than I earned in my first full-time job.
Same.
Same. Yeah, that was which I find that quite extraordinary. And that's only going up. I was reading a story not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago, that said that private school fees could top $50,000 a year in the not too distant future.
It makes me feel ill. And obviously the other major cities aren't far behind that. Melbourne was around about $31,000, and Adelaide and Brisbane were just a couple of $1,000s short behind Melbourne.
And then for public, it does vary, I would imagine, but you're still looking at hundreds of dollars per year more. And then you get into things that like uniforms and textbooks and all of these other expenses that
laptops.
The technology side of it as well, which kids need. And suddenly this cost goes beyond just say that the tuition, the actual main fee to go to a school for a year, to all of these extra add-on costs, and the whole thing just balloons. So you can see why a lot of parents are going, okay, I want to start early and I want to start preparing so that when we kind of get to that point, there is money in the bank.
And quite often it's having a baby is the catalyst to go and see a financial planner. For a lot of Australians, it's the one thing that makes them go, actually, I don't know how to do this, how we plan and prepare for the cost of education. Let's go see a financial planner.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. That would be that's the trigger.
Yeah.
To go and do that and get some external professional advice. All right, let's go through then some of the options, some of the ways to do this. And let's start with the options offered by banks and various financial institutions. I was having a bit of a look around in preparing for this episode, and I saw that a lot of different banks offered variations of something fairly similar by the looks of it, an education savings plan or a school savings plan. They all call it something slightly different, but how do they work?
Well, they're like a regular investment savings plan. So you contribute to it on a regular basis. And it normally is the same amount, say, for example, each month. And that money is invested. So it's not technically a savings account. Oh,
okay. So it's you're putting money in, but that money is then invested on your behalf.
Yes, and there's a range of different investment options. So you can pick something that's very conservative, that might have maybe bonds behind it, or it might be something that's a diversified investment portfolio.
Okay. How does that work then? Because is that over a certain period of time? Do you need to put a certain amount of money into this? Do you need to hit the same amount being put in every month? Are there fees? How much are you going to get? And when you get to the other end, how are you going to get that money out? And is that taxed? There's a lot to come out of this. And we've talked in previous episodes where I just hit these financial walls and go, this all feels too difficult. And I just feel like you could actually hear that moment just then where I hit that financial wall.
Well, you just asked me about 30 questions all in one hit.
And I expect you to remember all of them and answer them in order, please.
Look, with these educational funds, there's a wide variety of them, and they all have different terms and conditions. So some of them are required you to add a certain amount each month, but then there's a cap as to how much additional money you can add. So some of them have this, what we call the 125% rule, where you cannot exceed 125% of what you put in the previous year. Right. Some of them have terms and conditions where you have to invest them on behalf of the child. They have to reach a certain point. Some of them have tax advantages. Some of them lose those tax advantages if you withdraw the money. There's really a long list, and because they can really vary quite dramatically from one to the other.
Okay.
Which contradicts your statement where you said they all look pretty similar.
Oh, okay. All right. But they are typically a longer term thing. We're not talking a year or two. This is something that you might be looking at across the course of a child's full education.
Typically around 10 years.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. The downsides to a plan like that?
Look, the ongoing fees,
yeah,
I think are quite substantial.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a very limited investment choice, very limited as how the money is being invested. You can't customize anything with these types of investments.
Oh, so it's not like where...
You can't say, well, I want this money put in this banking stock or this supermarket, or
Is it more like superannuation where you can say, I want it balanced or I want it more conservative, or is it more...
I'd say it's even more restrictive and limited.
It's a set product, essentially.
Yeah. It's a basic investment product,
mm-hmm.
but there's not a wide variety. You've kind of pigeonholed typically between sort of one of, say, 5 different investment choices. So you can't say, well, I want all of this money put in direct equities, or I want 50% in international shares and then 20% in property. You don't have that control necessarily.
And taking the money out, again, because you don't pay for all of your education up front in one go, is it the kind of thing, I understand the idea of kind of putting money in regularly, and perhaps it's that 125% rule on the monthly contributions or whatever the frequency is. But when you need to take that money out, is it can you do it annually, or if you do it 6 monthly, or as a school fee, or if a big excursion comes up, can you take money out of that as you would out of a normal bank account? Or are there additional early break fees, that kind of thing associated?
Again, it comes down to the individual product. You've got to read the fine print. So some of them may have a withdrawal fee,
mm-hmm.
but what is a bigger concern is if you break it early, there may be tax consequences for doing so. So you need to look into that. But normally, once you've hit the term, you can take that money as a lump sum and then use that to help pay for your child's education. But normally people use these type of products to save up to a certain amount of money so that they can then withdraw the whole amount and then pay for their child's education, rather than just taking, say, $10,000 a year out of that account.
Okay, understood. Are term deposits an option then in this case? Because that would operate on a fairly similar basis to this.
Most definitely. You can use whatever investment product you like.
Mm.
Term deposits, can obviously give you that comfort and security. But again, you need to read the fine print, because with a term deposit, if you break it, there are penalties that you have to pay.
Okay. What about then just savings? I'm trying to do a fairly kind of broad look at all the different options. What about just using savings? If you were to use your regular savings account or an online savings account, which can often have higher interest because they are just your online ones run through your various banks, perhaps come with a slightly higher interest rate.
And sometimes low or no fees if it's online.
And so that may be, if you're looking at the kind of scenario that I was talking about, where you want something that you can take money out potentially more regularly, it would be easier to do that than trying to break a term deposit to take $1,000 out.
Exactly. So you could most definitely set up a regular savings plan of a certain amount of money per fortnight or per month or whatever suits you. And you would nickname that account, Johnny's Educational Savings Fund and do it that way. There are so many different ways of doing this.
And I'm going to suggest another one would be, and even as I say it, it's probably a bad idea, but I'm going to say it anyway, using your offset account to offset your home loan during that time, except you would need a lot of discipline to me. That if, again, this goes back to the many, many accounts debate that we've had a long time ago about where I have my money divided into somewhere between 18 and 26 bank accounts in order to impose some financial discipline that you can't spend money that's not in the account that you're trying to access. If it's all in your offset, you need a bit of discipline not to accidentally spend it.
Can I share a clever hack, though, or a helpful hack more than clever? And that is to use the nickname facility within your internet banking. So where your offset account is, nickname it Kids Educational Savings.
That makes sense.
Because from a psychological point of view, when you log into your account and you see your offset account, you see the word Kids Educational Savings. So you are less likely to jeopardize that savings because of the emotional connection you have to it than if it just sits there saying the offset account. And also reminds you as to what that goal is and how important it is to you.
Okay, I'll mention this one briefly because I suspect it's probably bigger than we can do in this episode. What about investing on your kids' behalf instead, buying shares, for instance?
Yes, that's definitely another strategy, and we most definitely have to do this episode because there are lots of different ways of investing for children, whether it be in their name or it be in your name or it be, as trustee for your child.
Okay. There are a couple of other ones that I want to run by you because I've come today to this episode with just a whole bunch of ideas that I wanted to just put them all to you and see whether any of them are in fact good. We'll come back in a second and I'll throw a few more of them at you. Kanna, we're talking about saving for school, and this has come about because of a question that was asked, someone who wanted to save money for their daughter's education but didn't know where to start. We've talked about a few different options, the education savings plan, school savings plans through banks and term deposits and savings and using your offset account. Are there any that we haven't considered? What about kind of other investments that you can kind of set up almost for yourself, but use some of that income from that to pay for education expenses?
This is actually a great question to ask. And it's funny because a lot of people look at, the cost of education and think, well, it's going to cost X amount of dollars per annum. It's going to, we need to have $300,000 saved up to put our children through private school education. Mm-hmm. Now, that's a great number to know, but as a financial planner, I would work with my clients in a slightly different way where we would look at, okay, it's going to cost, say, $20,000 a year to send your child to this school.
Yeah.
We've got a decent amount of time, say 13 years to achieve this goal by. Why don't we build an investment portfolio that can generate that $20,000 a year in passive income so that your investment portfolio's earnings are helping pay for your children's education. And by the time they've graduated or finished school, you can now use that passive income to help maybe prepare for your retirement or help create greater financial wellness in your own situation rather than completely eroding away a lump sum amount of money. So it's, I guess, about taking more of a long-term strategic approach where, as I said, you're not eating into capital, but you're actually using capital in a wiser way to generate an income stream that helps pay for that child's education or at least helps pay for a significant chunk of the child's annual educational costs.
So it's dual purpose.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah, because you're essentially using the income along the way to pay for education, but knowing that you still have that core asset there for your own benefit, for your own retirement or for whatever your financial goals are later in life.
Exactly. And this is something I have set up and done and helped clients do many, many times. And it has been absolutely brilliant. And you get that great sense of satisfaction as well as peace of mind that your friend was talking about, or you talk about as well, a lot of that peace of mind. And knowing that you are essentially killing two birds with one stone and that you are getting your money actually working for you in an efficient way. And this is, some people use a debt recycling strategy to supplement or complement this type of strategic planning when it comes to achieving a particular financial goal.
Okay, so really this is where a financial planner will help.
Yes.
In this kind of scenario. And it is about talking to a financial planner with your specific goals in mind. And as we've talked about, we've done an episode on what to look for in a good financial planner. And one of those is someone who will actually talk to you about what your goals are and help tailor a solution to actually target those and actually achieve those goals. Because this is a very achievable goal of saying, I want to be able to help my kids with an added bonus of setting myself up.
Exactly. And the quicker you can get onto this, the better.
The big question, I suppose, in particularly in a cost of living environment that we're in at the moment, is how are families affording this? Because we are talking as though there is this money kind of just coming in and being able to put into these long-term strategies. But how are families actually kind of doing this in the first place? Because these are phenomenal sums that we've tossed around today.
Look, a lot of families are redrawing from the home loan.
Oh, really?
Yep. A lot of families are putting their children's education on credit cards. And a lot of families are asking grandparents to chip in and help pay for those educational expenses.
Right. And some of those could be a little bit high risk. Some of those solutions like the credit card one.
Yes.
Feels like it comes with a lot of risk.
There was a daycare centre that was taking enrollments through credit cards, and for a short period of time they actually stopped that, where the parents could no longer pay for the daycare fees on their credit cards, and there was a huge amount of children that were suddenly pulled out of that particular daycare, and it was because they cancelled the credit card. So that's just a little inkling as to how people are actually affording it. However, on that note of daycare costs between $140 to $200 a day per child. And yes, you might get some money back from the government, but if you don't, that is actually the equivalent, especially if your child is in there full time, you're paying close to, $800 a week in daycare, which is exceeding the cost of private education. So if you're funding or footing the bill when it comes to daycare, please know that you're actually already halfway there, because you are pretty much paying the equivalent of private school fees as it is.
That is quite extraordinary.
And so when your children do finish daycare and maybe go to, say, a public school, use that money that you have suddenly now freed up that you're saving from daycare to maybe put towards saving your child's education, or put towards investing to help create that passive income to help pay for your child's, education further down the track.
It's been a good episode. I've actually, and I'll be interested in hearing from parents whether they have used any of these strategies or what has worked for them, because it's a case of everyone is going to have something that works for them, because it's a highly subjective kind of environment, because the targets are different as well, that you may not need to save $100,000 in order to do it. But it is particularly a case of getting good financial advice on what's going to work for you.
And the sooner, the better. And to do a shameless self-promotion of my book, Mindful Money, there is actually a whole chapter, I think it's chapter 13, completely dedicated to this topic of children and money and planning and preparing for their educational costs. All
right, we better wrap things up, but just to recap briefly, start with a figure in mind, that if you can put together an idea of where you want to get to, it makes it a whole lot easier to work towards a target that you actually know. School fees can vary significantly, but they can be tens of thousands of dollars per year, and it's not just the school fees, it's also all of the additional expenses, your uniforms, your excursions, all the little bits and pieces, extra tuition, that it helps to have a plan in place in advance. Lots of different options, financial products and things out there that are worth looking at, and they are worth some research and some time. A lot of banks and financial institutions have variations on school savings plans that are essentially an investment savings plan, that you contribute money on a regular basis and that money is invested for you. It does come with fees and various things that you need to be aware of before you get into that. Term deposits, something to consider. Using your offset account, using a savings account might give you a little bit more flexibility, but also another thing to consider as you're making your way through it. Investing on behalf of your kids instead is a whole nother topic altogether, and we will get into that one on a separate occasion, but just to demonstrate that there is more than one way to get through this whole process. And then investments that actually pay or help pay for kids' education through passive income that might then have the dual purpose of helping you achieve your financial goals later in life is something that should be considered as well. And that it all starts with getting some good advice, actually going and talking to a financial planner who can look at your circumstances, who can look at your goals and help you build a plan that might help you get there. I'd say this has been a pretty helpful episode, Canna.
I agree. There's a lot to think about. And for people out there who have young children or maybe perhaps planning on having a family and education is something that they really value, that concept of building the income rather than saving up the hundreds of thousands of dollars is a really powerful and effective way to really approach this goal and looking to achieve it in an efficient and effective way.
All right. If we want more information, where do we find you?
The fastest place is always Instagram, followed by Sugar Mama's Fireplay every Monday morning.
And you can hear me every day with Sean Aylmer on Fear and Greed Business News, Australia's best business podcast. Thank you very much for listening to How Do They Afford That? Remember, please hit follow on the podcast. Leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star rating. Always very much appreciated. Next week, we are talking about mobile phones. Very, very, very expensive, and the costs can just keep on building up. So should you just be buying one outright? We will get into all of that next week. It'll be a good episode. Don't miss it.